mind you, this bird is just staring at me. It's like I have an audience for this podcast episode. It's not a matter of just reading for the sake of checking things off your list. Read because you love reading. I've had to become creative in how I source my books.
Reading feels like magic. You open a book and the world shifts. Suddenly, you're not where you were. The words sink in, rearranging your thoughts, pulling you into places you've never been, into lives you've never lived. There's an intimacy to it, like holding someone's heart in your hands, their dreams, their secrets. Reading doesn't just teach you about the world, it teaches you about yourself. The books you love, the ones that make you laugh, cry, or pause, say as much about you as they do the author. And somehow, every page reminds you of this beautiful thought. You're a part of something so much bigger than yourself. This message is brought to you with love and prayers.
I wouldn't call myself someone who was a fan of reading growing up. I was a very busy child, and I don't think I could ever sit down for like extended periods of time just reading one book for hours and hours and hours. I mean, I was so busy that even movies themselves, I was never really much into movie series, anything like that. I was more on the active side. I'm not going to sit down for long and do one activity. I wanted to be doing something all the time. But even with that being said, I was still someone who appreciated for lack of a better word, the aesthetic of books, as well as the vocabulary I could hear in my friends and just the look of being a reader, you know. But still, that wasn't really enough to convince me to actually read for myself until much, much later in my life. Like a few years back, actually. So that's what we're talking about today. The love of reading, how to fall in love with reading, and everything in between. So I think most of us get introduced to reading, if it's not our parents who introduce us to reading, like through children's books and all that jazz, it's through school. But most of us get introduced to reading at a very young age, introduced to books at a very young age. I know I used to get children's books, and there used to be lesson books from church that I would get from a young age, and again, appreciated, the design of books. I appreciated vocabulary, and I appreciated people who actually used to read, and my sister was actually was the reader when I was growing up. But still, I wasn't someone who would dedicate my time to reading. And this went on for a while. Most of my primary school, the reading that I did was, the prescribed reading, the reading that we had to do for school. But to say that I did it personally, it wasn't for me. And it can only be God who allowed me to do as well as I did in my languages, because I wasn't really putting in that much effort outside of school to read and improve my vocabulary. But I guess I caught on to things in shows. I learned language through talking to people, and I guess secondhand reading through friends. But to say reading for myself to learn, not. And I actually got these books in my grade 7 prize giving as, the prize for all of the subjects and the grades that I passed or whatever. And it was one book for each subject or prize. So I got a set of Anthony Horowitz books, right? Gresham Grange, there's another book, The Grinch Who Stole Christmas, The Greek Who Stole Christmas. That's the thing. I've had these books since 2011, so over 13 years now, and I haven't touched those books. But something about those books helped me to hold on to them I think I only gave away one, but I really wanted to hold on to those books because I guess they reminded me of a simpler time. But now I'm actually interested in reading those books for myself, and I think I think that would be one piece of advice that we'll discuss this at the end of the episode on how to fall in love with reading all over again. So yeah, then primary school went on, didn't read much. High school, where we now have to do a bit more prescribed reading, and this is where I'd say I first kind of enjoyed reading. I've enjoyed my first few books in school. The ones that I can remember off the top of my head are Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart. Even though I don't really remember it, I remember enjoying it so much so that I actually bought another physical copy for myself. There's another book that we read in English. Something to do with crocodiles. No. Cry the Beloved Country. That was a good book. Cry the Beloved Country was a good book, and I would like to go back and read some of those good high school books. Just, because I think when we read books in school, it feels like a task. It feels like a chore. So we never really get to properly enjoy the book. And maybe that's one of the reasons why I never really got into reading, because it was a chore. It was a task. It was an assignment to read a book. We never really read for enjoyment. And I guess as a student, you have to take it upon yourself to enjoy the book for yourself. But I was in school to pass, I was there to get education and move on with my life. So everything else is just extracurricular stuff. But I think that kind of needs to be looked at by the schooling system. Like, how do you encourage kids to read for enjoyment? And I think as they read for enjoyment, it will then trickle down into actually reading the books that they prescribed in school. So I was one of those children who just read as an assignment, but never really for enjoyment. But there are a few books that stuck with me. I mean, even in Afrikaans, which was the additional language that we're studying in school, there was a book, Paljas, which I actually quite enjoyed. And that's the only one I can remember. But there were two books that I actually enjoyed in Afrikaans. Then, of course, we have to do Shakespeare. And I won't lie to you, like, people highly rate Shakespeare, and I'd say he's a great writer. He's written some amazing stories. But when I was introduced to Shakespeare, I was not in the mood for Shakespeare. And it's a feeling that's stuck with me all this time, and I don't know, man. Shakespeare isn't really for me. I'm willing to give him a try. And if I would give Shakespeare a try, I think the book that I would go for is either Othello or Macbeth, between those two. But man, Shakespeare wasn't all that. It wasn't all that in high school. I think the books that would stand out in high school, like, take for example Things Fall Apart. I think they had a lot of depth to them. They had very interesting characters. I mean, obviously the common stuff that would make a good book. Things Fall Apart. One thing that I really enjoyed was the really African feel of the book. So it's something that I somewhat related to. But also Chinua Achebe is just a great writer, and I know a lot of his greatness in writing was missed on us. It didn't land when we were in high school. So reading such books when you're much older is actually a really good exercise and a good chance to appreciate the art and appreciate the work that some of these authors go into. And it's why I would actually want to read that book again and a bunch of others, because I think when we were reading in high school, we were reading for the sake of, oh, I have a test coming up, I have an essay to write, teachers will probably ask questions, so I have to read. But you never really connect with the information being shared. You never connect with the author themselves. But as you get older and you actually dedicate your time into finding out more about this book, finding out more about the author, you realize that there's so much more to what you're reading than just these themes and these characters and the history that you have to remember for the sake of an exam. Wow, that's just a bird by the window. It's literally staring and just singing. Okay, that's fine. So yeah, that I think is the issue. The issues in school prescribed readings. It's just an assignment, and no one completes assignments for fun. They complete assignments for the sake of completing assignments. And until we actually choose to do such for ourselves, I think books will never really be enjoyable in school. And I'd actually like to find out from you, what do you think would be a way to encourage more kids to read more in school, just for the sake of reading? Because I think reading is such a lost art, and it's something that I really did want to touch on. Reading is such a lost art in this world, especially with social media and the rise of technology and all this entertainment, short form content. People's attention spans are dying. Hey, mine especially. Wow, I've realized over the last few months that my attention span has been smoked. Different to the issues that I had in school, where it was just me wanting to do something with my hands all the time, which is what prevented me from reading more and just not having an interest in the book. I feel like the kids today have a different challenge in that they have phones. They have this thing which is taking their time all the time, and they actually don't have time to sit down and just read, and they have been subjected to short form content all the time, that they actually, our brains aren't wired the same way they used to be. The videos that we see, they are made in such a way to grab our attention in like the first 2 seconds. A book is usually a slow burner, and now they'll give you advice if you're writing a book that like your very first sentence needs to grip your reader. But that's not the case for a lot of books. A lot of books like just want to build the world, build the characters for like the first chapter. But some people want that instant gratification. So for you now to grab a thick book, 300 plus words, Russian literature, which has thousands of pages, no one is going to be interested for long enough to actually complete a book. And it again takes like a lot of effort, which is something that I had to actually fix in myself to actually start reading. One of the main reasons why I started reading a lot, there were two main reasons actually. Last year, in my 7 months stuck in Zimbabwe while waiting for a visa, I didn't really have much to do. My family was in South Africa. Electricity was a hit and a miss. So I had to find a way to entertain myself, and data is damn expensive. So I had to find a way to entertain myself, and I found that in books. I got lost in books. Okay, I think I read as many books in 7 months as I had done in my entire life, and I really enjoy that. And I found myself learning a lot and getting sucked into this world, and I think it really did help me become more creative. And I think like stuff like this wouldn't have happened had I not gone through that. So I think that's one thing that people can take into consideration, putting their distractions away for the sake of reading. But again, it has to be intentional. And the second reason I got so into reading was I got a notification on my phone. So I get these screen time notifications on Sunday mornings, and they tell me my average hours over the week. The number I got was embarrassing. Okay, I had a very high screen time, and I was like, nah, 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 nah. If I will be on my phone for so much, it has to be for like good reasons. And one of the good reasons was actually reading books. So I told myself, if I will be using this thing so much, I want to maybe use most of the time to reading instead of TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, all those things. I mean, it's helped. I've read more. I've gotten better. Screen time has reduced a bit, but it's been a difficult journey. But again, it's just a matter of being intentional with your time, being intentional with what you actually want, and what I wanted was to read more. The third, I think, coming to like the solutions for how we can read more. It With social media today, we have bookstagrams, we have book talks, we have book YouTube, where people are promoting the most popular books. People are talking about their TBR lists, to be read lists, and they have turned reading into like this challenge and all of this stuff where you have to read so many books per year to be considered a reader. But I think, I mean, it's the same with like posting to social media. If your aim is just quantity, you will never really enjoy what you're doing. What you're aiming for is actually quality. And I think the first thing you need to make sure you do is read books that you love. The first book that I actually wait, before I get into that, a little story. The first book I can properly remember that I properly read and I had motivation to read. It was 2018, a year after I matriculated. And I had to go to Zim to go and apply for another visa. Surprise, surprise. And on my way to Zim, okay, it's just to backtrack, I had made a few friends, and we used to hang out in the library because my sister used to work there. And there was this girl who would join our group quite often. And, you know, we got to talking and we were cool. I wouldn't say we didn't talk that much in school. But then we spoke while I was on my way to Zim. And then I was like, oh, I need something to keep me entertained. I knew she liked reading, so I said I'd like something to read. And then she recommended Shlomo the Wife. So that was like the first proper book that I actually read because it was recommended by her. It was something that we got to talk about for a bit. So, hey, like we were talking about what can get you motivated, find a reason to read a book. If it's suggested by someone else who you have an interest in, I think it'll be a good enough reason to actually read a book. Now, getting back to what we were talking about, find books that you love. It was Shlomo the Wife, which I loved reading. Trevor Noah's Born a Crime was probably the first book that I properly read and enjoyed. There was the Subtle Art of Not Giving Up by Mark Manson was another book that I really enjoyed, and it is a book that I kept talking about leading up to my 21st birthday, and I told another friend. I'm starting to notice a trend. I told another girl about a book that I really want, and so she bought this for me for my 21st birthday, and it's up there among my favorite books of all time, and it's one of those books that I will never lend out. It will stay with me for the rest of my life. A fourth book that I really love, and I'm looking back at the bookshelf behind me because most of my books are still there. Desire of Ages. So Desire of Ages was the book that I started and read in my 7 months here in Zim. It is this religious book, which is like, it's almost like a biography of the life of Jesus. And I think that's the book that got me interested in Jesus. And I don't like the way that sounds, but it's the book that, mind you, this bird is just staring at me. It's like I have an audience for this podcast episode. Anyway, I fell in love with biographies because of the Desire of Ages, and I fell in love with Jesus because of the Desire of Ages, because of the emotion and how human Jesus felt. You know, as much as he is God, he had humanity to him, and you felt the compassion, you felt the love, you felt the pain that he felt. And it is the thickest book that I've read. And that's another set of books that I got really long ago, and I only read like 2 years ago. I think I got that in 2018. Yeah, I got that in 2018. And no, 2016 actually. And I've only read it like in the last 2 years. So it's not a matter of just reading for the sake of checking things off your list. Read because you love reading. I wouldn't have carried on with reading if I was just reading for the sake of just reading. And it's actually an issue that I have run into this year, where I just wanted to like hit numbers instead of actually reading stuff that I wanted to read. I think another thing that could be really useful to get us to read again is to find that childhood innocence again, books that connect us to our childhood. For me, that's Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart, as well as Anthony Horowitz's set of books. I have 6 with me. I think I originally had 7 or 8. And these are like short children's book, you know, like not huge text, but like big text. So it's not very long books, very easy to read. They were like grade 7 level, I'm sure. So going back and reading that will like take you back to a much simpler time. And we all are very nostalgic people, and we love reading books that take us back to our childhood. So reading those books that will ignite your love for reading again, because they take you back to a simpler time, could really help us to start reading more. And it's actually something that I'm planning to do, going through like the Anthony Horowitz collection again. Not again, for the first time after 13 years. And I guess reminding me how life used to be. Very nostalgic, I know, but it might help. We'll see. So there's been a lot of books that have helped me grow this love for myself, you know, that have helped me read more. And I'd say in the last 2 years, I've definitely like covered for my childhood absence from reading. I've read Where the Crawdads Sing, one of my favorites. I've read 1984, a classic. I've read Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye, really good book. What else have I read? Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. I've read it's a lot of books. I'd say in the last 2 years I've read almost 20 books, which is more than I ever thought I would read. And they've really pushed me into my reading era. And I think it's only because I have started connecting with books on more than a assignment level. I've started connecting with who the author was writing this book, problematic or unproblematic, the content itself, connecting with the characters, like actually propelling myself into the books. One thing I never used to understand with people that would read, a lot of them would say, oh, it's like an escape from reality. And I would try and say, oh no, don't escape from reality. You know, you need to be in real life and whatnot. I guess I had not gone through life enough, you know, and I had to experience a few things that would make me say, hey, I need to escape from reality. And I started escaping into books, and in a healthy way. Okay. I started escaping into books, and I started appreciating this world building that one person could come up with and create such real characters, such real dialogue, where you feel like these are really real characters. And not only that, I enjoyed finding lessons in what I was reading, because sure enough, it's just a book, it's fiction, it's characters, and you can read it and leave it behind. But I think everyone who writes a book wants the reader to walk away with something, so they will always put in lessons in that, and that's been one of my favorite parts of reading, finding the lessons in the books. But I mean, with all that being said, it's not easy, like getting your hands on books, so I've had to become creative in how I source my books. So I've gotten a few books from friends, I have swapped books with friends, but my biggest source of books, especially all the ones you see on the bookshelf behind me, were from like secondhand stores. I think behind me is a collection of, I think, 69 books, and out of those books, I think less than 10 were bought firsthand. The rest were secondhand books. There was a shop that I loved going to. It was a house, essentially, and they sold books on their balcony. You would find gems, I tell you, for less than 100 rand. I remember one day I went and bought about 4 books for 40 rand, because I had also taken like old books of mine to swap in. I got Stephen King's like 2 Stephen King's books, Duma Key and Insomnia, for about 30 rand each. I got Black Diamond by Zex Mda for like 40 rand, I think. I got Trevor Noah's Born a Crime for like really cheap. Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, as well as his other book, the red one, for I think about 50 rand each as well. So they were like really cheap books, And I think we need to let go of this desire of collecting the most beautiful books, fresh and whatnot, because it's not really sustainable. Books are expensive, and I get you supporting the author, but at the same time, they've been bought by someone else and they're available secondhand. It's not like you're stealing, so it's okay. There was also this other shop, was an absolute gem. Okay, this shop had books, CDs, and all that jazz, and they sold everything for 10 rand. Okay, so I would always go into that shop hoping to get lucky, and one day I did. I'm like flipping through all the books, and I don't really see something that I like. And as I'm about to head out, I see this one book, white with a bit of red titling. So I go back, crouch down to see what's that. And as I look, I pull this book out, and it was Sir Alex Ferguson's autobiography. I nearly lost my mind, okay? I am a huge Manchester United fan, and I loved Sir Alex Ferguson. So to get his autobiography, which I had wanted to read for a really long time, and to get it for 10 rand, less than a packet of Doritos, I didn't even think twice. Went and paid, ran out the store. Have I read it? That's a story for another day. But it's that love of finding books that you really wanted to read, and getting that collection growing, that really helps you to build your love for reading again. And everyone who has a habit of reading falls into this trap of buying more books. But if you have the means and you can collect a book as you find it, do it. Buy your books, get them, and read as you have those books. Read and start falling in love with these books, So, I mean, I think that's definitely like a roundup of what's helped me fuel my momentum and help me become intentional with my reading. Now that that's out of the way, I get to actually talk about what I really wanted to talk about in this episode, which is a blind ranking of my favorite books of the last 2 years. I need to take a sip for this one. So, I have a list of 10 books that I have not ranked as yet, and I will be ranking them with you, of some of my favorite books from the last 2 years. Hold on, I actually need to take a picture of this bird because this has been my buddy all episode long. Okay, anyway, my list of 10 books that I've read over the last 2 years, a mix of fiction, a mix of self-help, a mix of psychology. I did have The Desire of Ages in this list, but I think it's just out of respect to God, I will keep it away from this tainted list. Anyway, starting at number 10 is a book that apparently a lot of people did not expect me to read, but one that I really enjoyed. And mind you, I'm going to be listing them from 10 to 1, but this list could shuffle around so much because I enjoyed these books a lot, and ranking them is the hardest thing for me to do right now. At number 10, I have a book that a lot of people did not expect me to read, but I really enjoyed. And I mean, ranking these books is such a lie right now because I enjoyed a lot of them, and they could all be at number 1 and all be at number 10 because they were all that good to me. But yeah, the first book is The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. The progression, the character development, really hating some characters, and even the way it ends, I really, really enjoyed it. And apparently it's going to be adapted into a movie or a series. I would actually watch it because I really enjoyed it. This is one of those books that has divided the book talk and bookstagram and whatever. It's divided those communities because some people think it's trash, some people think it's good, but to me, it's gem. And I put it at number 10. Number 9 is one with a very controversial title, a title that I do not second, and it's I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. She was one of my favorite characters in iCarly, and when she wrote a book, I really wanted to read it. I had no idea what she'd write, but the book she wrote is very much up her alley, and it's such a heartbreaking book because you watch these characters on TV and they're so happy, they're so joyful. Then you actually find out what they go through, and it's painful to hear. And I think what's even more painful to hear in her story is that her pain was caused by her mother, Her mother pushed her to do all of these things, and her mother was the reason she hated who she was. And when her mother died, she wrote a book and titled it, I'm Glad My Mom Died. Her honesty in this book, mixed with so much humor, just made it was right up my alley, in something that I would enjoy reading. And I would also encourage a lot of people to read this book because it makes you think differently about the people that you see on TV, and to not just take them at face value. Some people are genuinely good people going through a hard time, and some of these celebrities seem like good people in front of camera but are really horrible. So it kind of stops you from idolizing the person that you see. So yeah, it was a lot. One of my favorite biographies. And number 9. And number 8, this book has been in my top 4 for a very long time, but at my current state, there are other books that I have to put above it, so it kind of drops to number 8, but it's not saying anything bad about the book. This is genuinely one of my all-time favorites, Kindred by Octavia E. Butler. So this was an interesting take on sci-fi, in that the main character, she keeps finding herself being transported between present time and like is it the 1700s, 17th century, but during like peak slavery time, and she has no idea why she keeps being dragged to this time. And there's elements of slavery, there's love, there is time travel. And the way Octavia Butler took such a serious topic, such serious writing, and spun it into sci-fi was chef's kiss, And they also adapted it into such a good series. And I think it's FX who canceled it after season 1. Like, apparently Netflix would try and pick it up, or some other production company, but I need them to finish the story, because the way that they deviated from the book was perfect, and I need to know how that story ends now. So yeah, Kindred is would have to be in my top 3 all time, but for the sake of this, I'll put it at number 8. Number 7 will be the first of my favorite psychology or self-help books, and that is Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. I've noticed that for me to enjoy self-help or non-fiction books, I prefer narrative non-fiction, and Man's Search for Meaning is a perfect narrative non-fiction book. He narrates his time in concentration camps and how difficult that was, but he uses that to explain this lesson that he's trying to bring across, that life is only worth living if you have meaning behind it, if you have something that's worth living for, He includes a whole bunch of his patient meetings and those discussions to explain some of his findings. He's one of the most respected psychologists out there, the one who coined logotherapy and all that stuff. So it's a good book, and one that I want to reread for the sake of taking notes. And it has really helped in writing my own book. So that's number 7. Number 6 is another self-help book, psychology book, that is like one of the foundations of my own book, and that is Anatomy of the Soul by Dr. Kurt Thompson. So this is, I think the best way I can describe it is a psychology book written by a Christian, and he dives into the mind, neuroplasticity, neurodivergence, attachment styles, trauma, all of these things, and then uses that to point back to God, and how everything we learn, everything we know through science, through psychology, is in essence everything that God has spoken about. Things like through the renewing of your mind, he uses that to speak to neuroplasticity, and how the things we feed our mind rewire our mind. So when God is saying you need to renew your mind, he's just saying fill your mind with new things. And that is exactly what I'm about as a Christian. Let's have realistic Christianity. It's not just a fairy tale. There is science behind what God says, and I appreciate people like Dr. Kurt Thompson. And it goes to number 6. Top 5 currently. Number 5 goes to The Book Thief. So this is a book that I had on my list for a very long time, and my friend actually had the physical copy, so we said we'd swap books, and when we actually met, we swapped books. The Book Thief is an amazing book, writing from the perspective of death, to the extent that death, you feel compassion, you relate to death. It was a bit unnerving, but I guess it's a testament to how good Mark Zuzak was in writing The Book Thief. the characters, the emotions, the development of things was also beautiful. And I don't have much to say on the Book Thief, but that I really enjoyed this book, and so much so that if I could find a physical copy, I would. Am I a bit of a hoarder of books? Maybe. Do I want a full height bookshelf in my house? Yes. So I need to hoard books. Number 4. Oh, this is such a toss up for number 4. But I think number 4 will go to Where the Crawdads Sing. This is another one of those books that I got for dirt cheap. I think this was less than 50 Rand. And stunning book. Like, the main character's development, seeing her grow up from her childhood, and ultimately how things end up for her in the story, the plot twist at the end. Like, the writing in this book is so vivid. You can feel, you can smell, you can feel how warm the swamp is. You can feel her pain when she goes through the pain that she eventually goes through, and when you eventually find out what she went through, you understand why things would happen the way that they did. And such a good book. I'm still yet to watch the movie, but on the book alone, deserving of number 4 for me. Number 3, people always say, oh, this book changed my life. Number 3 definitely changed my life. The Mountain Is You by Brianna Wiest. There hasn't been a book that has changed the way I think as much as this book. Mind you, I've read Anatomy of the Soul, which is another psychology book, but The Mountain Is You, wow. Self-sabotage, trauma, mental health, all of these things that she unpacks in a way that calls you out, and you just have to listen. And I listened. And now everything I do, which is almost a blessing and a curse, everything I do, I know what I'm doing in real time. Like with writing my book and me taking so long to finish off some parts of it, I'm like, oh yeah, that's self-sabotage, because I'm afraid of letting go of this book because it has become sort of a friend. And that sucks, having to analyze everything that you do. And so for her amazing writing, Brianna Wiest gets number 3 for The Mountain Is You. At number 2 goes to, and honestly, maybe the entire series deserves to be in this, and this is the Bromance Book Club. This is a series just funny, silly. It doesn't take itself seriously. It's just meant to be entertaining, and love it. I've read the first 2 books so far, and both of them were as good as each other. It follows this group of guys, sports athletes, famous, and they are like macho guys, but they have a book club and they read romance books to try and sort out their love lives. So the first one follows this guy, Gary. What was his name? I think his name was started with a G. I'm not too sure, but he is having marital issues, and so he gets pulled into this book club. He wasn't in it at first, gets pulled into it, and they help the book club tries to help him sort out his marriage. He's against the idea of having a book club because it's like, oh man, why must I be reading books? Why must I be reading romance books? That's embarrassing. And then he starts reading and it's like, oh, fair. Fair. This is actually good advice. And I think that idea of men aren't expected to be in book clubs, they aren't expected to be reading romance books, it's kind of what I'm on, in that I have a lot of these interests that aren't expected to be these manly interests. But why? Why do we think they're not, Because it's just enjoyable stuff, and it should be enjoyable for everyone without being judged for it. So that's what it is. Book 1 is them. Book 2 is a follow-up of book 1 with one of the characters who has a problem being genuine and vulnerable. He's forced to be vulnerable, so that's too amazing. I'm looking forward to reading the third and the fourth. I think there's 5 books. I'm looking forward to finishing the series, and I'm almost certain I will enjoy all of them. And lastly, number 1 goes to, I think in this entire ranking, number 1 is the one that's set in stone. A sci-fi book that gripped me so much that I remember just skimming through a bunch of pages because I wanted to know what happens next. A book that forced me to stay up late because I couldn't sleep. And that book is Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. What an amazing fiction. What an amazing piece of science fiction. Following Blake Crouch, who gets kidnapped, wakes up in a different place. Everyone seems different to him. The whole world seems different. And he realizes he's been taken to a different reality. And there is another... What was his name? I forgot his name. But he realizes that there is a doppelganger, an alternate version of him from an alternate reality that came to steal his life. And now he has to go through the entire book trying to get his life back, trying to get his wife back, trying to get his son back, and basically fighting against himself for this life that was stolen from him. And the version of him that stole his life reached like professional and academic excellence, but without the love that this main character has. And it's the story of all of these multiple different alternate versions of the main character who all want this guy's life because he's found love. All of these other ones have found, professional success. They found wealth. They found awards and all of these things. But what they really lacked was love. And amazing. The ending, amazing. The worlds that get painted as he goes through these different realities, amazing. The tension as all of these different versions of himself try and steal his life, amazing. How he finds a solution, amazing. He spirals out of control. He starts losing his mind to the extent that you started understanding why these other versions of himself do the things that they do. You start having compassion for these villains. Amazing writing, amazing books. And yeah, number 1, and it got taken on by the perfect company to adapt it into a series, Apple TV. Please, if you're not going to read the book Dark Matter, if you enjoy a bit of science fiction, please watch the series on Apple TV because they adapted it beautifully. And I think the author of the book was actually part of the team writing the script for TV, so that helped it to be as successful as it was. I mean, it sticks to the book quite closely, which is also okay. It's okay to adapt. It's okay to deviate as long as what we're watching is good. So yeah, Dark Matter, Blake Crouch, number 1. If I have to give a few honorable mentions, which there are a lot, The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison, my first Toni Morrison book, and her writing, I get why people were crazy over it. I absolutely hated Pacola Breedlove, but it makes sense why she was the way she was. Ikigai, the Japanese secret to something. Another beautiful psychology self-help book about, these different practices that we can take to have a meaningful life. 1984 by George Orwell, a classic that I would recommend for everyone to read. And especially in our world today, with somewhat of censorship over media and how monitoring happens so much. It's crazy to see how similar 1984 is to reality. What's another book that I could have on this? Oh wow, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a is another really good book. I can't believe I actually didn't put it in my top 10, but that again is another amazing book. It just gets straight to the point. Life is just a series of choosing one problem after the other, and you just need to learn to just not give up, you know? So, again, stunning book. What else? Mudbound was actually surprisingly good. I hate the copy that I have, the physical copy, because it uses the cover based on the Netflix series. But Mudbound is another really good book, set in, I think, during the slavery period, but it's really good book. Then, yeah, I think that would be all for now that I can think of that I've actually read. Oh, then there's a friend of mine wrote a book, Reflections of Betrayal. And I think what I loved about it is being able to see and hear my friend in her writing. So yeah, I would put those in my honorable mentions. Next, I would love to finish reading Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky. I would love to read the autobiography of Alex Ferguson. I would love to read Wuthering Heights. I would love to read the rest of the Bromance Book Club series. I'm excited to get back into reading. It's been difficult for me to really get down to reading because it's been a bit of a difficult year. But books are here to kind of help with that, you get to escape from your problems. So, reading is beautiful, guys. Read. Reading is good for you. Reading helps you open your mind. It gives you exposure to so many things. It improves your vocab. There are so many benefits to reading. Books have helped me see my life as a story worth reading and a story worth sharing. And everyone that I see around me is their own book, their own story. And there is no such thing as a boring story out there, not even a boring book. It's just a matter of, are you willing to read it? Are you interested enough to find out the context and the author and the meaning behind the book or the person? But above all, we just need to learn to slow down again and enjoy this gift of reading, this ability to transport ourselves to multiple worlds through these pages, because now that I've experienced what it's like to pour yourself out into pages, I really do have much more of an appreciation for the art of writing. Books are a gift. Books truly are a gift, and I'm glad that more and more people have started talking about reading and talking about books. And I hope we start spending more time in these pages, because I have a feeling that the more we read, the more our lives will be changed.